Hey guys, Woodchuck here. Got a helpful tip on a John Deere deck spindle. The L, LA, and D series tractors are pretty much the same thing, same parts and same decks. And now that these tractors are starting to get some age on them, I'm seeing quite a few of them come in for repair, and a lot of them, it's the same thing. The bolts have broke off in the spindle assembly, or I need to pull the spindle assembly off to do repair, and more often than not, the bolts just snap off in the spindle assembly. So when that happens, you can go and buy a brand new spindle assembly. Sometimes you can find them for around 25 to 35 bucks with the bearings and the spindle shaft. A lot of times all they need is some grease in the bearings and you can reuse all the parts, but once the bolts break off, it's a little bit hard to reuse that spindle. The older style that come on the tractors are perfect for this repair that I'm doing. They have a large flat area on both sides of the bolt hole, and you can just clock the spindle and drill brand new holes right next to the existing holes. This spindle has 2 bolts that broke off in it. I've tried blowing out the old bolts with a torch, and you can see here it just melts the bolt and starts melting the aluminum, and you know it's not going to work, and you'll end up destroying the spindle before you ever get through the bolt. So that's not feasible. I just did it to experiment and see what would happen. This is one that I have already done the repair to. You can see all 4 of the bolts broke off in this spindle, and I just drilled brand new holes next to the old bolt holes. The easiest way I've found to do it is if you have a deck repair ring that you can get on Amazon or eBay for about 11 bucks, you can just clamp it to the spindle and then use it as a guide to run your drill bit through, and all your holes will be perfectly lined up. On the back side, you can see the old bolts are still there, but if you clock it over just enough to get it away from those, then they won't interfere with your nut. If you're running, how I do it, I run a bolt through and put a nut on the back side. It's a lot better than using the self-tappers like how they come from the factory. You can also take a grinder if they do interfere, and you can just hit the heads of those with the grinder and knock them off, and then they won't be in your way. Another option is you can hold your spindle under the deck and use the holes in your deck. You know, just clock the spindle, take a marker, and mark all 4 spots that you need to drill. Have to have a pretty steady hand to do that, and then also with the drill you got to make sure you're hitting the exact spot every time. I use a 5/16 drill, which is a little larger than the factory holes, because I run a threaded bolt and put a nut on the back side. I like the heavier duty hardware, and then you can also disassemble it later without having to worry about the bolts breaking off again. Here's a couple of the old spindles. You can see there a couple of those bolts came out. One of them did. 3 of them broke off. This one, a couple of them came out and a couple of them broke off. I mean, pretty much every one I work on now, if I remove those spindles, at least have a couple of the bolt heads break. But what I would recommend is if you can repair your deck without pulling that spindle assembly off, leave the spindle assembly on, knock your spindle shaft out and your bearings out, and you can actually just stick new bearings and new spindle shaft in if you need to. And if the housing's not damaged, just leave it on the deck and save a little bit of money. I was just going to show real quick how easy this is to do. If you have a good drill and drill bit, it only takes a minute. Well, hope that repair helps you out, and see you guys later.